The morning of July 14th, 1789. I am standing at my bookstall on the Quai de la Tournelle in the shadow of Notre Dame when I hear the first shot. Then another. Then a sound I cannot name. Not an explosion, not thunder. The sound of 10,000 people moving through the streets with the same intention. I begin hiding the books, the dangerous ones first. Voltaire under the floorboard, Rousseau behind the wine jars. If they search the stall, the wrong title is a death sentence. By nightfall, the Bastille will be rubble, and the world will have changed in a single afternoon. My name is Etienne Moreau. I have sold books on this quay for 30 years. Paris ignites, and it has been igniting for 2,000 years. Whether I survived that morning, whether the bookstall is still standing, whether the Voltaire is still where I hid it, you will have to stay with me to find out. But to understand what happened on July 14th, 1789, you have to go back, all the way back, to an island. Before Paris was Paris, it was an island. Around 250 BC, a Celtic tribe called the Parisii settled on a small oval of land in the middle of the Seine river, the Île de la Cité. They were fishermen, river traders, people who understood that whoever controlled the river crossing controlled everything that moved between north and south. The Seine was the reason, not the backdrop. The Parisii did not build monuments, they built boats. Then in 52 BC, Julius Caesar arrived. Rome did not ask permission. The settlement was burned to the ground. The Parisii themselves torched it rather than surrender it intact. But Rome rebuilt it as Lutetia, the marshy place, the mid-water dwelling, not glamorous, but Roman. For 3 centuries it was a proper Roman town, an amphitheatre, bathhouses, temples, straight paved roads. The Roman amphitheatre still stands in the 5th arrondissement today. You can sit in its stone seats and look at the same sky the Romans looked at. The Rue Saint-Jacques follows the exact line of the Roman road. Paris remembers everything it tries to forget. By the 3rd century, the empire was fracturing. Germanic tribes raided from the north. The settlement needed a new name. That name did not come from a king or a general. It came from a young woman standing alone against an army that had already brought the Western world to its knees. In 451 AD, Attila the Hun was marching toward Lutetia, and the population was ready to abandon the city entirely. Then a young woman named Genevieve told them to stay, to pray, to not flee. Attila's forces changed course and spared the city. Whether you believe in divine intervention or in the quiet power of a woman refusing to surrender to fear, the result was the same. Paris survived. Genevieve became Sainte Genevieve, the protector of Paris. The hill that carries her name today is where the Pantheon stands, where the greatest figures of French history are entombed. By 508 AD, Clovis I made Paris his capital. The city took its name from the Parisii, 1,000 years after they first settled the island. Paris was no longer a Roman outpost. It was becoming something distinctly, stubbornly, fiercely its own. And within 600 years, that stubbornness would produce the most ambitious building the medieval world had ever attempted to raise. In 1163, construction began on Notre Dame Cathedral. It would take nearly 200 years to complete. Flying buttresses distributed the weight of the walls outward, allowing the walls to become glass, allowing light to flood the interior in colours that had never before been seen inside a stone building. Those rose windows, that vertical reach toward heaven. Every stone a calculation, every arch a theorem. Those buttresses are still standing. You can run your hand along the stone today and feel the same calculation that has held the weight of those walls for 800 years. The masons rebuilding Notre Dame after the 2019 fire are solving the same structural problems their predecessors solved in 1200. The conversation never ended. At the same time, the University of Paris was taking shape. one of the first universities in Europe. The Latin Quarter got its name because students debated in Latin. This is where medieval Europe learned how to think. By 1300, Paris had 200,000 people. But wealth attracts violence, and Paris was about to learn that with catastrophic thoroughness. I have thought about those people many times. 200,000 Parisians in 1300, building Notre Dame stone by stone, believing they were building something permanent. They were about to discover how fragile permanence actually is. The 14th century nearly destroyed Paris. First came famine, then the 100 Years' War, beginning in 1337. Then in 1348, the Black Death. The plague killed between a third and half of Paris's population. Bodies accumulated faster than they could be buried. Forensic analysis of plague-era burial sites beneath Paris confirms the speed of mortality. Bodies interred without coffins, in mass graves, the city overwhelmed by its own dead. In 1420, Paris fell to the English and their Burgundian allies. For 16 years the city lived under foreign rule, and then came Joan of Arc, a 17-year-old peasant girl from Lorraine, illiterate, claiming she heard the voices of saints. She persuaded the uncrowned heir to the French throne to give her an army. She lifted the siege of Orleans and shifted the momentum of an entire war. Joan was captured in 1430 and burned at the stake in 1431. She was 19 years old, but her impact could not be burned. Paris was liberated in 1436. The city that emerged from a century of plague, occupation, and war was harder, scarred, and carrying knowledge that only devastation can teach. And a new kind of king was about to arrive, one who would transform Paris into the capital of European civilization. The price of that transformation would first be paid in blood on its own streets. The story of Paris's golden century does not begin with a king, it begins with a massacre. On August 24th, 1572, St. Bartholomew's Day, Catholic mobs hunted Protestant Huguenots through the streets of Paris. Thousands were killed over several days, their bodies thrown into the Seine. Estimates suggest 70,000 dead across France. It happened in these streets, at these crossings, in these courtyards. From that violence, eventually, came Louis XIV, the Sun King, who ruled from 1643 to 1715. He expanded the Louvre, built the Hôtel des Invalides, commissioned Grand Boulevard, and founded the Académie Française to regulate the French language itself. In 1682, he moved the royal court to Versailles, 15 miles from Paris, a distance that told the city exactly what he thought of it. Versailles was built on bodies. Historians estimate between 1,000 and 3,000 workers died annually during construction. More people died building Versailles than died in many of the wars it was designed to celebrate. Even from my bookstall, I could feel the weight of Versailles, and I could see what it required the rest of Paris to pay. I came of age in the world of Voltaire and Rousseau, the world of the Encyclopédie, published in Paris, censored repeatedly, and published anyway. I read those volumes by candlelight. I sold them from under the counter when the authorities were watching. Paris in the 18th century was the most exciting and the most dangerous place in the world to have ideas. But ideas do not fill a stomach, and the hunger was on every face I passed on my way to work. By the 1780s, Paris's cemeteries were overflowing so badly that decomposing bodies were contaminating the wells. The city began moving the bones of millions of Parisians into the old limestone quarry tunnels beneath the streets. Miles of underground passages lined with the remains of 6 million people, their skulls stacked in careful rows. The catacombs exist because Paris ran out of space for its dead. It is the kind of fact that tells you everything about what the city was carrying. France was bankrupt. The aristocracy paid almost no taxes. On July 14th, 1789, the people of Paris stormed the Bastille. 7 prisoners were inside. 7. The Bastille was not a strategic target, it was a symbol. And in Paris, symbols have always been more dangerous than armies. What followed was a decade that changed the world. The monarchy was abolished. King Louis XVI was executed by guillotine in January 1793. The Reign of Terror saw tens of thousands killed. By 1794, Robespierre himself faced the same blade. I watched all of it from this quay. Revolution is not beautiful. It is necessary and it is terrible, and those two things are not contradictions. The revolution had no ending, only an exhaustion, and into that exhaustion stepped a Corsican general who understood one thing perfectly: that chaos in the right hands is the raw material of empire. Napoleon Bonaparte seized power in 1799 and immediately understood what Paris needed to become. Not just a functioning city, but a monument to history. He commissioned the Arc de Triomphe. He transformed the Louvre into a public museum, filling it with the treasures his armies brought from across Europe. The Napoleonic Code still influences law across the continent today. Napoleon's Paris was a statement. All roads lead here. History is made here. His empire collapsed. Beaten at Waterloo in 1815, exiled to St. Helena where he died in 1821. But the city he had imagined remained. And 50 years later came the man who would tear it apart and rebuild it from scratch. Baron Haussmann demolished medieval Paris, replacing narrow winding streets with wide, straight boulevards. He built sewers, installed gaslighting, and imposed the visual uniformity of the Haussmann apartment building. That limestone facade and wrought iron balcony repeated block after block. Why? Modernity, sanitation, control. Wide boulevards are harder to barricade. Its beauty and its cruelty came from the same plan. In 1870, Napoleon III went to war with Prussia. The French military collapsed. Paris was besieged for 4 months. People ate rats and zoo animals to survive. When the city finally surrendered, the humiliation was total. 2 months later, the Paris Commune, a radical workers' government, held the city for 72 days. When government forces retook Paris in May 1871, they killed between 10 and 20,000 communards in a single week. Among the dead were school teachers, seamstresses, printers, ordinary Parisians who had believed the city belonged to them. The city that had just celebrated its liberation from foreign occupation turned its guns on its own people. The Belle Epoque lasted from the 1870s to 1914, and Paris in those years had the quality of a city that had decided to be extraordinary. The Impressionists were dissolving form into light on the walls of galleries that had never seen anything like them. The Moulin Rouge filled its red-lit halls every night. The Paris Metro opened in 1900 with Art Nouveau entrances by Hector Guimard. Those extraordinary organic forms in cast iron, unlike anything built at a subway entrance before or since. And in 1889, the Eiffel Tower was built for the World's Fair. Parisians hated it immediately. An iron monstrosity, an eyesore, a disgrace to the City of Stone. Today it is the most recognised structure on Earth. The lesson of the Eiffel Tower is the lesson Paris has had to learn repeatedly. What feels like destruction often turns out to be the future. The 1920s brought the Annie's Folles, the crazy years. Hemingway, Fitzgerald, Picasso made Paris their home. Paris was alive, electric, and modern. It was the place to be if you were young, ambitious, or running from something. But Paris had always carried this pattern inside it, and the pattern was not finished. In June 1940, the enemy marched in without a fight, and Paris let them. German troops entered Paris on a bright summer morning, and the city did not resist. It had been declared an open city, surrendered without a fight to avoid physical destruction. The swastika flew from the Eiffel Tower. For 4 years, Paris lived under Nazi occupation. The cafes stayed open. The theatres operated. And over 13,000 Jewish Parisians were arrested in the Velodrome Diva roundup in July 1942. Arrested by French police, acting under French orders, and sent east to camps from which most never returned. Paris was not innocent in its occupation. Documents declassified in the 1990s confirm the extent of French administrative collaboration with the deportations. The reckoning has been long, and it is not finished. But resistance existed. Underground newspapers, hidden Jews, sabotage, small, terrifying acts of refusal. In August 1944, Parisians rose. Barricades went up across the city. Hitler ordered the city burned. The German commander Dietrich von Koltitz refused. On August 25, 1944, General de Gaulle walked down the Champs-Élysées. Paris was free. Liberation was not clean. It never is. The people who had lived through 4 years of occupation carried something that could not be named, let alone explained. It would take a generation to begin asking the right questions. And it would take a cafe, a table, and 2 people willing to say out loud what everyone else was afraid to think. After the war, Paris became the capital of a different kind of revolution. Sartre and de Beauvoir held court in the cafes of Saint-Germain-des-Prés, grappling with what freedom means when you have looked into the face of occupation and collaboration. The answer they arrived at was uncomfortable. Freedom is not given. It is chosen, at cost, every day. On May 3, 1968, students at the Sorbonne occupied their campus. Within 2 weeks, 10 million workers had joined them in the largest general strike in French history. Barricades rose in the Latin Quarter. The same streets, the same paving stones, the same centuries-old reflex. The protest did not topple the government, but they permanently changed France, opening debates about gender, sexuality, and the meaning of authority that echo still today. In January 2015, gunmen attacked the Charlie Hebdo offices. 12 dead, millions marched in the streets of Paris, carrying pencils. In November 2015, coordinated attacks killed 130 people at the Bataclan, at restaurant terraces, outside the Stade de France. The grief was enormous. The defiance was louder. In April 2019, Notre Dame caught fire. Every screen on Earth showed the same image. The spire, begun in 1163, rebuilt across 8 centuries, collapsing into the flames. A structure that had survived the Revolution, the Commune, 2 world wars, and the occupation, burning on live television. I watched Notre Dame burn from this same quay where I have always stood. The grief was not French, it was human. What surprised me was not the fire. Paris has always burned. What surprised me was how much the world grieved, as if they had not realised, until that moment, how much of themselves they had stored inside those stones. Notre Dame is being rebuilt. Paris is always being rebuilt. The morning of July 14th, 1789 is 30 years behind me now. The Bastille has been rubble for 30 years. The king has been dead for 30 years. And I am still here, still on this quay, still selling books. I still have the Voltaire I hid that morning. It is on the shelf behind me now. The authorities never found it. Some books survive everything. Paris is not a symbol of beauty. Paris is a symbol of refusal. Refusal to accept tyranny. Refusal to accept injustice. Refusal to accept that the world as it is must remain the world as it is. That refusal has been catastrophic and magnificent in equal measure. The same city that gave the world the Declaration of the Rights of Man also gave the world the terror. The same streets that sheltered resistance fighters also handed over its Jewish neighbours to the occupiers. Paris does not let you look away from the contradiction. It never has. It probably never will. 2,000 years ago, a Celtic tribe on an island in a river decided that controlling the crossing point was worth dying for. Every generation since has arrived at the same conclusion. What Paris teaches is that principles require vigilance. The moment you stop hiding the dangerous books is the moment the barricades go up again. Or worse, the moment they do not. Look at the city around you. What are you willing to defend? If this journey through 2,000 years of Paris moved you, please consider hitting the like button. It helps more people find this history. And if you want to keep walking through the cities and centuries that shaped our world, subscribe. Every era is waiting. Together we keep history reborn. I will see you in the next era.